Forrest, I want to know, is it okay to rape animals?
For children to rape animals. Whoa.
Okay,
Not
so
going to flip that around. Stop, I just did. You were saying.
So, how do you have conversations about how much violence is going to be in the game and how graphic that violence is going to get?
Honestly, I've never had any of those conversations, ever.
Maybe you should start.
I usually do it with the same group of people, and the same group of people are really weird. So we tend to have all sorts of things. We've had time traveling. I think it was a guy who got turned into a monkey. Started time traveling. Had sex with his mother without realizing it, and then. Alright,
okay, I don't want to hear any more of this.
Yeah, you got weird stuff.
Yeah, we're sharing stick for you. We're going to take the sharing stick away from you.
It was a very confusing roleplay.
Well, of course it's different if you're playing with your established group that you know very well, as opposed to, say, running a con
game.
Con games, I think you got to be just sort of dialing it back generally.
Yeah, well, I mean, we do a lot of the indie games. So I've run Vincent Vickers in a Wicked Age at conventions, and for some reason, whenever I run that game, there's always demon fucking. And the last time I ran it, there actually was a minor in the group. And I'm like, I don't know if this is a good idea, because I don't tend to take it towards demon fucking, but it always happens. And we tried.
It's built into the system, right?
It kind of is, actually, and sure enough. And I'm like, okay, then we can go. Fading to black.
On the note of violence in games, something that I think can help a lot is implementing feng shuis or white wolves from their exalted line. The use of the player describing the action, and they'll go into the amount of detail they want.
Sure, but what about the other players at the table when, Trogdor is lovingly describing how he's slowly pushing the knife through someone's eye? That even squicks me out a little. Now, granted, I still do it.
You can also use not describing things to great effect. If we had a situation where a player, we killed the big bad, the player happened to play a Minotaur, said to the GM, and I quote, "I commit an atrocity."
There's an excellent technique.
What do you mean by that? I'm not going to tell you. I commit an atrocity, and you left it there. You never described what he did. Of course, all of us. So
you know what? That's the mark of a good horror film there. When it fades to black and you don't know what happened, your imagination fills in things that are more twisted and disturbing than any film could ever do. So fading to black in a role-playing game, you can do just as well.
That was a wonderful moment.
The Blair Witch Project, the scene with the scene where they're just hearing the guy's distant screams, and you can't see anything, just hear him screaming. My mind was going, probably worse than anything that Rick Baker or Tom Savini could possibly have come up with was going through my head.
Fair enough.
Do you ever use these kind of extreme themes and extreme elements to pull the players deeper into the storyline and deeper into emotional attachment to it?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
And how?
There's the BDSM part.
Do you want to talk about Lance?
For years now, we've been sort of working through her issues with sexual assault, and I'm an idiot, and I just didn't think it was going to be as disturbing when it was kind of comical,
and it was a male character.
The character was male, and boy did I screw up. Now that's actually not the question you asked. You asked how.
Actually, I wanted to share an example that follows his comment.
Please.
We had a game we were running in Exalted where we ended up throwing afoul of a local god who was in charge of child abuse. Like that was his purview, was abusing and exploiting children. And it was interesting because even though part of us responded with levity to kind of blunt the issue of a very serious, what we consider crime, we were drawn further in because our characters and us as players thought, we have got to do something about this. We are driven to stop this and everything about this because we now as players feel strongly. And our characters have taken a stand hunted down everything that had to do with that god, burned his temple to the ground, got herself banned from some huge trade city as a result of it. But it was memorable, and it was engaging, and we still talk about it.
That level of nervous laughter where people are laughing but they're not really laughing, when you're playing a gloves off, scare the crap out of me kind of game, that's what you're looking for.
Actually, Little Fears, the original version, I haven't seen the new edition, plays on that whole thing. Like the big baddies in the original Little Fears are essentially they're the 7 princes who represent the major awful things that can be done to children. And it's one of those games that is not for everyone. And one of the baddies is the Prince of Lust, who is the Prince of Child Sexual Abuse. And I actually managed to squick myself while running that game.
What do you do to squick your players?
Actually, the most recent thing that I did to squick the players wasn't about sex or violence, although it was kind of indirectly involved with sexuality. It was challenging the character and also, by extension, the player's beliefs. One of our players, I don't know his actual religious beliefs, but in his character, he was playing a character who was very, was a Christian fanatic, and not in a Tea Party, sort of, Bible banging way, but that he had been born and raised on a small commune farm, and he eventually kind of went a little bit crazy, set the place on fire, unintentionally burned his parents, and then ran off to the city to try and forget that this happened. And what I had done as GM was having fairy characters in Deliria Fairy Tales for New Millennium, bringing trailing smoke and things like that, which would occasionally freak him out. And then there was a belly dance character. He was sitting in the bar club where a lot of the stuff takes place. And there was a belly dance troupe in there, and he was thinking of the horror of Babylon and this and that and everything. And one of them comes over and starts flirting with him a little later. Turns out she's actually a really nice person. She's not she's not an evil slut. She's not the horror of Babylon. She actually finds him at first because he does something that helps her. I don't remember the exact details of the story right now, but he does something to help her, and she's like, wow, this is a decent guy. So she starts trying to get to know him, and he inadvertently, the player and the character, inadvertently insulted her, actually really, really badly, and she just took him down, not in a, God damn it, anything like this, but just in a really hurt, how could you possibly think something like that about me?
That's a good punch.
And I had both myself and the player almost in tears at the end of this. How could you think? I thought you were not, and how could you possibly think that somebody like me was like that? And he's like, but that's the way I was raised. And how could you possibly believe that a god like that was good? And we just had this beautiful exchange between the two characters, which was not about profanity, was not about sex, was not about drugs, was not about violence, but was very emotionally intense for everybody in the group, which two of the players here are actually nodding their heads that they were there for that game session. And that, I think that also involves quote-unquote adult content. Adult content isn't just sex and violence and drugs and fear. Adult content is the thing that you have to be an adult to even understand and to have the perspective to question. One of the things, I'll be right with you on that. One of the things that we wanted to do with White Wolf was not just push the envelope for sex and violence and blood and carnage and crime and politics. We did that. But one of the things that we very intentionally did too was try to use role-playing games as a method for getting people to open their minds and explore and ask questions and demand answers from the world that were more than just, I hit it, I nailed it with my crossbow. And that too is adult subject matter. And that's something else that you can work into your games without ever eviscerating a child or, having demon fucking.